This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
All right, this is the one. I can feel it. Podcast. The first and the best Chiefs podcast. Real ones know the show is called Amateur Hour. The Amateur Hour podcast is now airing on KC Sports Network. Ryan Scott Hall and his Dirkness are back again. We've got football, friendship, and fun. All these shows, we're still number one, season 12. Oh, wow, here it comes. Welcome, my friends, to Amateur Hour Podcast. Man, I can't hit that note right. Podcast! Is that right? Well.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
What is this, Amateur Hour?
Yeah, I ain't no Superman businessman like you. You know, I'm just an
amateur,
I suppose.
Amateur Hour
Is what's happening.
Amateur Hour
Is what's happening.
Yeah, that's right, folks. The show is called Amateur Hour. I'm Ryan Scott Hall, and joining me today, Dr. Deep Dive himself, his Dirkness.
So,
You tell me, Dirk. You're the one driving this thing today.
I'm driving. Don't let me drive. I've been deep diving all week. Do not let that happen.
I thought you were typically safe behind the wheel, like a 5-star, highly insured driver with a very great premium.
Oh yeah. Only the best. I thought we were here to talk Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. We're talking that all hour, correct? Have you seen the rumors?
I have heard that Travis is the next in a long line of, ex-boyfriends.
Sloppy 87s. Is what they're saying.
I'll say this. If I'm Travis Kelce, I think that, I wouldn't mind necessarily like being in the group of former boyfriend. Jake Gyllenhaal's on that list. Hated, I think. He seems like a decent dude. I don't know. What do I know? Makes good movies.
He's a very good looking man. I don't know. I would like to be in that group, sure.
Okay.
All right. You want me to drive this? So we got to talk about Chris Jones because there has been an actual update. He reworked his deal. He may or may not get some more money. I don't really understand what the whole hubbub was about, but it was something, and it lasted a long time, and it talked about it. Well, we didn't talk about it a lot, but a lot of people talked about it a lot. We talked about it a little. But what were your thoughts on the Chris Jones holdout coming to an end and apparently playing this week?
I would think he'll probably be limited on Sunday. He played the most snaps of any defensive lineman in the league last year, missing a game and then having to kind of get into shape or real football shape and everything. Obviously, I think will prevent him from doing that again this year. I'm happy that he's here for now. I think that for probably most Chiefs fans, they look at the situation and they say, what was the point? Like, what did either party gain out of this other than maybe knowing with almost certainty that this is his last year in Kansas City? Is that the only thing that either party actually gained? Is just the knowledge of what the immediate present is, and then, the relatively near future as well.
Yeah, I can only think of a very specific Saved by the Bell say no to drug commercial. And they come out dumb, stupid, crazy, dangerous.
I don't remember this commercial.
Stinks. It's like their say no to drugs commercial. It's the only thing I can think of. It just seemed idiotic from the. Not from the start, I guess, or from the end, if that's the end point. This all seemed like it was driven by the Katz brothers, and they really wanted to get their name out there. These are two dudes with no other big clients in the NFL. You notice how each press release mentioned the Katz brothers. Schefter's tweet mentioned it. Rappaport's tweet mentioned it. Brett Veach's statement mentioned it. They're sitting next to him in Arrowhead Stadium up in the suite, which seemed bizarre. This just seemed like it was completely led by these two to try and get their name out there, to try and be like the next super agent, the next Drew Rosenhaus, who's out there with Torello and doing sit-ups to get his name out there. And it really just seemed like an idiotic move from the start. And I think they got into Chris Jones' head and he listened to them. And that's what steered all of this. And it just came to a crashing halt. And they tried to play it like they came out victorious. But here's the thing. They did not at all. Chris Jones and his agents lost big time. They didn't win much here, a couple $1 million. And it's all led by these two Katz brothers, who I refer to as the Smelly Cats, from one Phoebe Buffet. And I think your conclusion is correct that I don't see much chance of Chris Jones being back here in 2024. It just seems like he's going to play out this season, try and reach those incentives, try and drive up his value as much as he can. The Chiefs will tag him next year and look for a trade partner.
And I mean, ultimately, I think that even saying that like they don't have any other, big clients on their roster, like even that is being generous. It seems like, if memory serves, every other client that the Katz brothers represent are former Chiefs and none of note.
Are they from Kansas City or something?
I think their second biggest earner after Chris Jones is DeMarcus Robinson. But I mean, they've got guys like Byron Pringle and, the likes of maybe Garrett Dieter or something. And I'm not even trying to throw shots at these guys, but it's like, it's literally Chris Jones and a bunch of his friends that he talked into signing with these guys. And so I think if I'm Chris Jones, I am firing these guys. I am getting rid of them. And I am going and hiring someone like Drew Rosenhaus, who actually has a proven track record, and say, hey, Drew, can you do something similar to what you did for Tyreek? And, all of these other players on Rosenhaus's roster. I mean, this is the thing that I think a lot of people have maybe missed the mark on when we think about the Chiefs going through that negotiation with Tyreek and Rosenhaus and how quick they got it wrapped up and traded Tyreek away. As soon as they understood like how far apart they were, how the Devontae Adams contract was really throwing a wrench in the negotiations, they said, okay, cool. Where do you want to go? Rosenhaus worked it out, and Tyreek was gone. Was it a few days into free agency? Sure. We didn't necessarily think that it was going to be something we needed to worry about. And suddenly they had to go sign Juju and MVS, and they won a Super Bowl, so it's fine. But I don't know, man. I mean, this whole thing just seems like amateur hour, I guess.
Oh!
Like,
welcome to the show. Should we invite them on? Them on?
They kind of belong a little bit, right?
Boy, have we got the show for you guys. You'll fit right in.
Agents,
I mean, and they got professional shows where like Drew Rosenhaus goes on, where he actually makes his clients more money when they do stuff like this. That's kind of the goal here. But yeah, and if they would have done this, if they would have gone through all of this back in March or April, similar to Tyreek, then I think there would have been a much different ending, because they would have realized how far apart they were, and they would have, they could have traded him at that point. I mean, it would have been weird coming off a Super Bowl and making that kind of move. Like Tyreek's coming off at least like an AFC Championship loss, which is very successful, obviously, but not a Super Bowl win. Trading one of your best players coming off that would be weird. And so maybe that played a part in it. But they reached a point where neither of the sides could really do much else here, because the Chiefs need Chris Jones to complete their pass rush this year. There's nothing they can do right now to trade him and get value that's going to help them this year and anywhere close to what Chris Jones is going to help them. Like, you can trade for draft picks and that helps you in the future, but that really submarines your season this year. And Chris Jones has to report, and he's playing the week 8 card, but you're going to be sacrificing $10 million to do that. And you're not going to make up that $10 million with whatever money you're holding out for. So really both sides just realize that they're, at an impasse here. And I think I was listening to our guy, Seth Kaiser, yesterday, and it's kind of like one of these court cases. Obviously, it was a court case where nobody wins except the lawyers. Like both sides, one side may win or they come to a plea deal or whatever, but really the only people that win here are the lawyers because they're the two that are cashing in. And it really just feels like both sides kind of lost here, even though the Chiefs majorly won.
Yeah, I mean, and ultimately, like, let's be clear. The fact that Chris Jones is, it seems like, heading toward being traded, I can't imagine the Chiefs would just let him walk, even if it is tricky with having to franchise tag him and afford that tag right at the beginning of the league year to be able to turn around and trade, however it works. I don't know, with the money and stuff. Regardless, the Chiefs are not going to get value for Chris Jones, period. I think the Katz brothers saw to that the Chiefs aren't even going to get peak value out of the trade because, as you mentioned, even though it was coming off a Super Bowl and it would have been weird timing, it would have been the best time for the Chiefs to try to capitalize on his value because he just had the best season of his career. And now he's missed a game. He wasn't in camp. There's all these different things. I mean, and we could just boil it down to money. And there are going to be other owners that are excited, thrilled even to pay him, not just the contract, but whatever compensation that the Chiefs get. And here's the thing. If you're sitting back holding your breath thinking that the Chiefs are even going to be able to like get a late first for him, no. The best thing that the Chiefs can probably do with Chris Jones as capital is see if they can get somebody in the just outside the top 10 or the middle of the round to swap firsts with them so that they get all the way up and can get a more premier player in the early stages or middle of the first round. I don't think that even just taking a second round pick and a conditional third or fourth or whatever for Chris Jones, ultimately, I don't think that necessarily serves the Chiefs' best interests, even if they're not going to give him a contract. I mean, I think that no matter what, I don't see Chris Jones signing a contract here. And I think that the Chiefs are getting the short end of the stick as far as what he's actually worth on the field versus what he's going to be worth in trade compensation.
And yeah, part of that, I mean, the value is, I mean, we're a long ways off from this, but the trade of him, I mean, at first I was thinking a first round pick and then some. And then I kind of started thinking about it. He's going to be over 30 years old. He's going to be commanding or asking for $30 million a year, depending on what happens this year. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I started kind of wondering what that value would be. And man, anything less than a first round pick would this is just a take an L kind of thing. But I'm not sure what you do. I mean, maybe they can repair this thing and find the middle point and repair this after this year, after time goes by. But yeah, that was my immediate first thought was man, they did all of this and then all they did was just rework a 1-year deal. They didn't add any years. They didn't stick with this original deal. It's just felt like this is the very end. And it's just it's tough. I mean, it sucks to see, and it sucks that this had to drag out like this. I mean, especially when you got guys on the other side of the ball like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce that are constantly asked about their contracts now with new people signing and asked about how they're not at the top of their position and how they kind of defer and just well, we're here for the team and we're fine with our value and we look at our legacy here in Kansas City as number one on our priority list.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that in some ways Chris Jones has alienated himself from just the average fan. You're going to hear that talking point from a lot of people oh, he's so greedy. He already makes all this money. Look at Pat, look at Travis, whatever. I don't want to begrudge the man for wanting a raise, but I just don't understand why, if the Chiefs had an offer on the table from our guy, Nick Wright, reporting real numbers, and I just trust that it's sourced and it's something that we don't have to worry about. And he says it's a 2-year, $55 million or whatever. And it's why would you not just take the fully guaranteed $55 million over the next 2 years? It's a really good deal for him. But I don't know, the Bosa thing kind of really threw a wrench in there. And actually a break is about to throw a wrench in my point. So look, I didn't tell you, Dirk. I actually went and took a tour of one of the Boys and Girls Clubs close to where I work. Okay. I went there like last week, got to walk around, and they got a lot of really cool stuff going on inside of this building. A lot of hands-on learning. They've got like a 3D printer in there, this big maker space for kids to be able to do stuff after school. And they're giving kids meals so that they get a dinner while they're kind of waiting for their folks to be able to come and get them, and a lot of programs and stuff to be able to help them both academically and really just kind of trying to develop good people in there. And look, folks, the Boys and Girls Clubs aren't just doing this type of like after school programming. Did you know that the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City actually has sports programs for local kids too? Beyond that after school programming, the clubs offer leagues for baseball, softball, basketball, flag football, and more. So search for volunteer opportunities on helpkckids.org and do a solid supporting local kids and, our partner for this year.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
What the hell, Nick? Our producer just cuts me off. I'm trying to talk up the Boys and Girls Club, and they got cheated. That one's on Nick, and we're gonna have words with him after this podcast. I'm gonna hold out from this podcast is what I'm gonna do. I'll tell you what. But yeah, Boys and Girls Club. All right, with back to Chris Jones. I just want to know his image at this point, both from a fan perspective and walking back into that locker room. Do you think there's any ill will held in that locker room that kind of looks at him like, man, why the hell weren't you here in week one? And then a separate question, do you view Chris Jones any differently than you did, say, 9 months ago?
Honestly, I think it was just a really stupid decision. And I don't know if that necessarily means that I view him differently. The fact that he got here way before week 8, I think is a good thing. To me,
expectations low, didn't he?
Right. What this feels like to me is that Chris Jones sat in that suite. He gave that weird press conference in front of the Ronald McDonald House, which does great things, mind you. There are no Boys and Girls Clubs, but shout out to the Ronald McDonald House too.
With the smelly cats right next to him, might I say?
I think that
have they been apart for 1 second since this started? Are they sleeping next to each other?
They're brothers. They're very close. I guess the way that I look at the situation is Chris probably allows this to play out. He's trying to trust them and empower them through this whole process. Every time a guy talks about the business side of football, they say, I let my agents handle that. And I think that finally what we saw, if I want to give Chris Jones some credit here, is that he stepped in and said, you guys aren't this isn't working. I just missed a game. I just watched my guys go out there and lose a game that, don't get me wrong, the defense didn't play poorly, but if I'm out there, we probably win. And what is this helping in terms of my contract? Just get me on the field, man. I mean, most of these guys, they are dyed-in-the-wool football players. And so I don't necessarily think that my opinion of him has changed, apart from just the way that I view that, this is his last season. That is the update for me on Chris Jones. But, when you ask about the guys in the locker room, dude, that's tricky because, don't get me wrong, it's the first week of the year. There's a bunch of, potential baked-in excuses here. They lost a game that he chose to just sit up in the suite. I don't know that anybody's going to be, truly confrontational with him. But I think that most of them are probably sitting there thinking man, you didn't come to camp with us. You didn't do all that work with us. You sat there and watched us lose a game, and then you got a little bit more money, but it's clear, you're not going to be here next year either. How down for this are you? And I don't know. It's a high stakes game that I'm certainly not a part of. I'm just out here on the outskirts, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are guys that are feeling away and maybe in the group chats that Chris isn't in have some things to say.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
pure speculation, but
oh, you're not in those group chats?
I'm not. No, I'm not.
We can get on that. Yeah, it is a weird thing. I mean, we were just ready to put Chris Jones in like the pantheon of like all-time Chiefs greats. I mean, after that AFC Championship, after that Super Bowl, it was just like I listened to our show before the season, and like we were just on cloud nine talking about Chris Jones and how he took it so personal. He made it a mission to dominate all season long and get back to that point and not make the same mistake that he did the year before. And then he did it. And it was just like this poetic journey that lasted an entire season. And we just watched it play out, and it was incredible. And, it's right in the aftermath right now. So it's fresh, but it doesn't, I don't hold them in that same regard right now. Obviously if we go win another Super Bowl this year, this will, I think, quickly be forgotten. So I think time will tell on this, and it's kind of tough to say right now. But that image of him sitting in the suite at Arrowhead Stadium watching that game is kind of burned in my memory right now, and it's just kind of a weird image and one that I don't really like. So, and that's really all I got on the Chris Jones situation. You got any final thoughts on it?
Nah. Let's move on.
Oh, I'm steering this. God, you shouldn't let me drive. I wanted to expand on an idea here that we touched on last week's show, and that was kind of that the wide receivers, there was almost kind of too many cooks in the kitchen, and they had these 7 wide receivers, and they were all active in the game, and they were all getting snaps, and they were all getting a target, and it led to maybe like the sloppiest receiver game we've seen from this team. I don't know, in the Andy Reid era. It's tough to say how far back, but it was just weird how, the drops were one thing, but then just the sloppy play overall, running routes wrong, receivers being in the same spot, just nothing seemed to be clicking. And so an idea that I floated was like, maybe they got to shorten this up and trim that wide receiver room down a little, and maybe not play all 7 of these guys, and put some of these guys on ice for now until they get this ironed out. But we didn't really expand on what that would look like in terms of who we want to see get those snaps. I asked you this a couple days ago. I'm still struggling with the answer myself. So, I don't really have a great answer here because all 7 guys kind of bring something to the table that you like. So what direction would you like to see them go with the wide receiver room? Or do you not see this as a problem and you just keep playing all 7?
I don't know how much of a problem it is right now. Early in the season, when you're trying to figure out what you've got, I think that mixing and matching them and trying to find out their strengths and their weaknesses, particularly against full speed, NFL competition. I think that they can maybe take a little time here with this group of 7. I honestly, when I look at this situation, like the first guy based on Thursday night's game, the first guy that jumps out is going to be the exact same guy that they talked about on the lab last night. It's Rashee Rice. He had, in my estimation, the best game of he and Sky Moore's careers. Don't get me wrong, Sky Moore had a nice punt return redemption in the Super Bowl and also scored a touchdown on a play that apparently he lined up wrong, which is like kind of funny because he lined up wrong, but was also so wide open that he maybe made the right decision. In any case, I think that I see something in Rashee Rice that reminds me of one of my all-time favorite Chiefs in Dwayne Bowe. And it's in good and bad ways. I think he knows how to use his body. I think that he's got great acceleration. I think he has really good explosion. He will make catches that seem impossible look routine, and routine catches look impossible. There's a lot of similarities in there. I've actually been trying to think about, like, if I want to make this comparison, do I have to start calling him like Rashee Rice-Bowe? He's like a bowl of rice. Rice-Bowe. It's bad. It's bad. Yeah. Rashee Rice-Bowe. like at your favorite local, Taco Bell, a nice rice bowl.
Another food nickname to add to this offense. Andy would love our full menu here that we have to offer, like Cheesecake Factory size menu
of Chiefs player nicknames. Rashee Rice jumps out to me as a guy that if I can have him go out, recover from a drop, score a touchdown, show me some things in his first game on national TV, that's a guy I want to prioritize, because if we're talking about like I think the real core of that receiver room in terms of what we're hoping for, it's the 4 young guys in there, truly young guys, I guess, which is Rashee Rice and Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney. And then ultimately, I think a lot of people are pulling for Justin Ross. And so those are the 4 guys that, to me, I want to see them develop. I want them to have the chances to develop. I want them to get the snaps to develop. Does that necessarily mean it's the best thing for this year? Probably not, because guys like Justin Watson and MVS and Richie James, I think, are probably more consistent and more reliable than any of those 4 young guys. So it kind of depends. It's like pick your poison here. And unfortunately, with us not actually being employees of the Chiefs, there's a lot that we don't know about their practice habits or their study habits or how often they're lining up in the right or wrong spot or running the route at the right or wrong depth or knowing the play call. There's all these different factors that go into it that, like, well, if Justin Ross can't line up correctly and he's had these injuries, then he should maybe be the inactive guy more often than not. Maybe he is your wide receiver 7 and you don't necessarily have him act him on game day. You're still just kind of easing him into the action or something. But I don't know those things. If we're talking about pure skill set, I mean, I would still probably point to, I don't know. I think that Justin Watson feels a little redundant in comparison to guys like Justin Ross and Rashee Rice and even MVS in that way. Richie James is a guy that maybe some people would want to sit down, but I think that he is probably the fastest guy in that room. I guess maybe how about this? The quickest guy in that room. And I think that when it comes to like some of the, end arounds and running a guy back and forth across the formation and doing some drag routes and things like that, like I think that Richie James can be a weapon for them in that way and fill a role that is now vacated by Tyreek Hill and McCole Hardman.
Yeah, I mean, I also think they gave a jet sweep to Sky Moore, and they kind of did a little bit of that last year. They can do that with Toney as well, and obviously with Rashee Rice, but he's more comfortable taking it from Blake Bell, obviously.
Yeah. Really good rapport between those two.
So, yeah, I think they have a plethora of guys who can, kind of take that role. So they have options there. But yeah, I'm kind of looking at it the same way as you, where, right now you might want to go with the guys that you trust the most, just because of how sloppy it was last week. And with that, I'm looking at names like MVS and Justin Watson, and then either Sky Moore or Richie James, I guess. But that walks a fine line, because we talk about this being a January team. And so we want this team to be at its best in January, and that would mean getting your most skilled players ready for January. And that would mean you're looking at Kadarius Toney, Rashee Rice, MVS or more, or maybe even Ross in there. I don't know, there's a lot of talent, so that's kind of tough. But, if you throw all those guys out right now, like maybe you don't know what you're going to get when you're kind of staring down 0-2 right now. You got a tough game coming up. And it's not necessarily time to, maybe start working on the guys. So I think I would say I would lean towards the more trusted guys right now. I would lean on MVS. I would lean on Watson. And then I think they're kind of set on Sky Moore with how many snaps he played last game. I don't know if we see a demotion quite yet. I mean, I want to give him more chances. These chances will run out. I mean, if he doesn't start producing, they're going to start running out here soon. I'm not to that point yet, but I would lean on who you trust the most right now. And, that kind of goes with everybody. That kind of goes with Andy. That kind of goes with Pat. Okay, who do you trust to be in spots, who do you trust to lead this, to work this offense with? And we're going to lean on those guys right now. And then maybe as the season goes on, and, you're sitting there at like 5-2 or 7-3, something more comfortable. And you're like, okay, now we're start gearing up for January. And you really want to get your guys like Kadarius Toney and Rashee Rice more involved. Although Rashee Rice might just zoom up this depth chart and start, taking over and filling up a spot from the get-go here. It's just a really tough question because I mean, you have like 7 wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4s here. Like they all feel very equal. And so maybe they start to shake that out themselves, and people just kind of rise up to the crop like Rashee Rice. Or maybe they don't, and you just have to, cut a line in the sand here and be like, Justin Ross, we like your talent. We like what you bring here, but we just don't have the snaps right now to give you. So we're going to lean on these guys, and you're just kind of going to ride the bench here and wait till next year to really break out here. So it's a really interesting debate between where you want to go. But I do think that they shorten the room this week, and we see maybe one of them inactive and then one of them, hardly play and not get many targets out there.
It's possible. And I've got a question about Kadarius Toney, but first, football is back in full swing with another week of epic games. And who's got you covered on the action for every single one of them? It's DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. New customers can bet $5 on football and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Nobody's missing out on the action this season. All DraftKings customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every game day this September. So get in on the NFL Week 2 action with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the app now and use code KCSN to sign up. If you don't use that code, folks, Dirk's coming after you. All right? New customers can bet just $5 and take home $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with that code KCSN. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/football. Terms for eligibility, terms, and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance, and eligibility and deposit restrictions apply.
Wow.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
So, question about Kadarius Toney. Is this a guy that, even though, one of you, please, while I riff here, find me his age. Because I know that Kadarius Toney is a first-round draft pick. I know that the Chiefs gave up a third-rounder for him. A top 100 pick, it's kind of a premium asset, so to speak. At least a day 2 pick, something that the Chiefs need to value. And I know that he's 24. Thank you to Nick. I'm sure Dirk had it too. Which one do you actually think you got it first?
Well, he typed it. I didn't do anything. So
yeah. Okay. So next time, type it, man.
I was going to sign it.
Yeah, there you go. So look, Rigatoni Kadarius, 24 years old. The Chiefs still have control of him for this season and next, and if they choose, a 5th-year option. And so this is a guy that I think in certainly in Brett Veach's case, and Andy Reid's case, and just the Chiefs organization, they hope that his best football and, the majority of his football playing career is still ahead of him. But let me ask you this, Dirk, you, not the Chiefs, you. Do you think that this is a guy that's actually going to develop, that he's going to be something for this team other than just like an additional weapon that shows up sometimes, because that is precisely the way that I think of him. I don't see him as a wide receiver, and I don't see him as a long-term solution at that position. And so when we think about how we use these snaps, I think of him like he might as well just be like the running back 3. All right. Like not necessarily lining up at running back, but like a guy that I'll give 5 or 10 snaps a game. And he's electric, but I don't think I don't know. I'm very, very down on Kadarius Toney, and it literally has nothing to do with the drops in that performance on Thursday. It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't. Like run a route, Kadarius. Run a real wide receiver route for me, and don't get hurt when no one is touching you just because you cut too hard or something. Like I just don't. I see the electricity that people like, but he is not polished at all. And I just don't know that he's going to develop, man. I don't see it.
Hopefully Kadarius isn't listening. Thanks, Nick. Hopefully he is, and he kind of gets the idea. It was interesting that he wasn't on Twitter anymore, but then he popped up on Instagram to clown the Giants when they were getting beat up. It is an interesting question, and maybe he is just like purely like a gadget guy, almost like a Tavon Austin kind of comes to mind, where he's never going to be like a prototypical receiver, and he's just gonna be this explosive guy, and you kind of get the ball in his hands. I mean, think about, he didn't have many snaps in this game, but he had a lot of targets, which is kind of the way they used him last year. I mean, he's not out there, kind of clearing space and doing the dirty work, you could say. But when he gets the ball in his hands, he makes it worth it. And he certainly did last year. I mean, he's explosive. He didn't seem quite as explosive this year. I mean, maybe that's coming off the injury, or maybe he just didn't have the ball in space whatsoever because he never caught it. So maybe that was a problem. But yeah, I mean, I think he might be right that he's not going to be running traditional wide receiver routes. Like, I don't know if he's going to run a 15-yard dig route. And so it's just going to use them in spots, which is fine. I mean, it's not us that spent a first-round pick on him when we spent a third-round pick on him. So if you're getting that kind of production from a third-round pick, that's fine, especially if he's producing like that. So yeah, I think he might be right. And the long-term way is an interesting way to look at it, just with the guys that are going to be here moving forward, because MVS, Watson, and Richie, there's a good chance that all these guys, this is their last year here, when you're really moving forward with Kadarius and Sky Moore and Rashee Rice and Justin Ross. And so maybe you look towards the future and just start leaning into those guys hard. I mean, if there's nothing that's going to separate them, you might as well pick the guys that are going to be here the longest, kind of thing. So I don't know. It's a very tough question, a very loaded question to sort out this wide receiver room. I'm sure it's a big topic to discuss. I'm sure Andy's thinking on it, and it'll be interesting to see just everything that happens in week 2 in terms of snaps, in terms of targets, in terms of what direction they move with their receivers coming off that embarrassing showing from them, and how much better they look with what we assume is Travis Kelce back on the field. Because I still don't think that this wide receiver room is too much worse than last year's, especially when Mecole Hardman registers 0 snaps for the Jets last night. He's active. He just never got on the field, and he's playing behind guys like Randall Cobb. So it's not like Mecole Hardman made a huge difference. So maybe you just think Juju Smith-Schuster was that big a difference maker. And if you really think that they're missing a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster, then you go out and make a move during this season, because there are Juju Smith-Schusters to be had in the league. I mean, he's the 30th to 40th best receiver in this league. I mean, he's a veteran that you can count on, and they went to in big moments last year, so I get that. But there are guys like that can be had. I mean, wait for a team like Tampa Bay to fall apart and you go get like a Chris Godwin kind of thing. Like there are guys out there like that. If you want them bad enough, and if you see that's the biggest obstacle between you and repeating as Super Bowl champions, then send a 3rd-round pick to go get another guy like that. And the good thing is that Veach has shown every willingness to go make a move like that, and spice up the room if that's what he thinks we need for this season to compete for another Super Bowl.
How about this? By the time Rigatoni Kadarius is no longer a Chief, I think that he will have like fewer yards, fewer catches, fewer touchdowns, certainly much less of an impact than the guy you just mentioned, McCole Hardman. Better Chiefs career, McCole Hardman or Kadarius Toney when the dust clears?
It's interesting. I mean, it's a good comparison. I mean, it's wild that they had both of them on the team last year, although they really only was it the Super Bowl when they were like they were sharing the field for the first time, and like then one of them it was AFC Championship, and they shared the field for the first time, and then one of them got hurt like immediately. It lasted like 2 snaps. Like they cannot coexist. They're two similar guys.
I do want to give you a little tip of the cap there, Dirk. The Legion of Whom tweet. Looking at the like picture of the Chiefs wide receivers, and they're all doing their thing before the Lions game, in which they did not do much of anything. Legion of Whom. Nice pun. I loved it.
Oh, thank you.
I think we kind of want to expand a little bit. Maybe do you want to look at Chiefs Jags or week 1 stuff first?
Let me first an interesting Mahomes stat that I want to get in here. I saw today from Scott Cashmere. Mahomes' time to throw versus the Lions, 3.28 seconds. In Mahomes' career, when he's throwing at less than 2.9 seconds or 2.9 seconds or less, basically fewer than 3, he's 47-4. So when Mahomes gets the ball out quickly on a game-by-game basis, he's winning 47-4. When it's above 3 seconds, it's 14-11. So you can kind of get a sense for when like Mahomes might be struggling a little bit, or maybe the offense is struggling a little bit. I don't think Mahomes had his best game in this game. I mean, obviously it's hard to gauge with all the drops. But you can tell when things aren't going right. It's usually when Mahomes is holding onto the ball. And you know, that AFC Championship game, the second half meltdown is the first thing that comes to mind there, obviously, when he's holding the ball forever. So just I thought that was a really interesting stat that we didn't really touch on, but just something to watch going forward. If Mahomes is getting out the ball quickly and in rhythm, this offense and this team is nearly unbeatable.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly didn't look crisp in that week 1 game. And in some instances, you know, Andy Reid's doing the Andy Reid thing. Hey, maybe I shouldn't have thrown Kadarius out there. He's obviously rusty, hadn't been here for all of camp. Maybe I leaned on him too much. It's my fault. And I mean, that's prototypical Andy. I don't even think he's wrong in this instance. I don't think he's even like trying to be the bulletproof vest. It's true that he probably shouldn't have put him out there.
Oh, but come on. He totally is. And this is why players love playing for Andy Reid, because it's something like being on the field and dropping a ball that literally has nothing to do with Andy Reid. And yet he's still up at the podium taking the blame for that. And, you know, he can do that because his job security is rock solid and all that. But players love that. I mean, they want to come and play for Andy Reid because they know he's going to have their back at all times. I mean, I thought that was just a perfect encapsulation of that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that we've seen the people that are able to give the time and energy to all 22 and show you where different miscommunications happen and guys bumping into each other and a guy maybe running the wrong route because of where, you know, 2 players end up at the end of their route. They're not spaced out enough. It's drawing too many defenders. Mahomes doesn't know where to put the ball. There's a lot of different mistakes that are going on there. And that's, I think, the strangest part. Still, you know, here we are 5-6 days later. It's very odd to see an Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes led offense not look at their best in week 1. I mean, it's something we've never seen before. And really
well, we did see it one time, the old red wedding of 2014 versus the Titans. Who could forget?
I mean, I could. Maybe one too many deep dives. But yeah, I mean, I like that the Chiefs really kind of have nowhere to go but up offensively. And we know Andy Reid's MO, like early stages of that game, Andy's going to make a point to, you know, get Toney involved, get Sky Moore involved, build that confidence back up. I mean, those are probably the first 2 plays in Andy's first 15 is, you know, quick little dots, get the ball in Toney's hands, get the ball in Sky's hands. You know, they make that basketball analogy. Sometimes you just got to see it go through the net. Sometimes you just got to see it actually land in your hands.
That would be good.
And so that would be a great start for two guys that didn't have a catch, did not register a catch in the first game of the season.
Let's talk a little bit about the NFL and just in terms of, did anything that you saw, the rest of week one, did it make you feel any better or any worse about how the Chiefs performed? Anything that stood out, as it relates to the NFL or as it relates to the Chiefs and their loss and coming off that, playing the Jags next week?
I really think that the weekend slate and ultimately really coming to a head with Josh Allen's performance on Monday night, coupled with the Aaron Rodgers injury, an AFC opponent, I think not only that the Chiefs are playing in week 4, but is going to be a team that's, potentially posturing for playoff position. They're probably off the map now. I mean, they called Chad Henne. Look, I love Chad Henne, all right? But not because I need him to be on the field for a full season. And maybe they're just trying to bring him in to, help rein in Zach Wilson. It's Zach's team and everything else. But
could you imagine that Jets defense though with Chad Henne as their defensive coordinator going against the Chiefs? He knows all our secrets.
Yeah, that would work. I don't know, man. I mean, I liked seeing some of our toughest opponents look as bad as they did, because ultimately what it did, I think, for I hope a lot of Chiefs fans, just go look at some box scores. Just go see how bad some of these teams played. Joe Burrow had less than 100 yards passing in week 1. You see some of this stuff and you're like, man, the Chiefs had no Chris Jones, no Travis Kelce, and, kind of lost in like a fluky way. Like, I'm all right. I guess we don't have nearly as much to worry about as some of these key opponents. I think
we got the tiebreaker right now because we have a better excuse than most of the other teams. So I think, a lot of the AFC powers are 0-1, but our tiebreaker right now puts them ahead of them because our excuses are better.
I think that's actually the first tiebreaker, isn't it? Better excuses.
Yep. Coin toss.
That was an update that was in the fine print of the last CBA, where the players also lost the ability to hold out or recoup the fines from holding out. They just overlooked the fact that bragging rights or excuses was really starting to play into these tiebreakers.
So I was kind of looking at it. It doesn't change for me about like the actual Chiefs team because I wasn't really worried in the slightest bit, even right after the game.
Not worried, but not even for a minute.
Not a second. But it does, change their path in the AFC when you look at Cincinnati losing, Buffalo losing, the Chargers losing, and the Jets dropping out of the race. Obviously those are the top competitors in the AFC. And so some of those B teams, the Ravens won in convincing fashion, I guess, but they didn't look great. Miami looked really good. So, keep an eye on them kind of thing. Browns might have a dominating defense, or maybe that was just a rain fest. Deshaun Watson still looked like shit. So it was kind of interesting. There were some interesting league-wide stats. It was the lowest passing yard totals in week 1 since 2006.
Whoa.
You think everything's just steering towards more and more passing, more and more. It was the lowest passing yard totals since week 1, 2006. There was 11 quarterbacks under 30 quarterback rating, or QBR, excuse me, which is more than the last 2 years, week 1s combined. So there was 11 quarterbacks under 30 this year. The last 2 week 1s combined, there's only 10. So just a lot of shitty quarterback play out there. It was basically the Miami and Chargers game and then everybody else. And nobody really looked good, which was kind of weird. There's lots of weather, I guess, going on the East Coast, so maybe that plays into it. But just an interesting week 1 overall. I'm not sure too much else really stood out. The Bengals is probably the lead story. And I didn't really see them get talked about that much. I guess people trust them. And it's a lot of hey, they did this last year, so they're guaranteed to come back from it again this year, which I think is a little bit dangerous because they looked really bad. 80 yards passing, and it was just, both teams in that, the first half was just it was gross to watch. Both offenses just looked completely dreadful. So interesting to keep an eye on the Bengals. Obviously, Josh Allen he was probably the lead story today, just with his turnovers going nuts, and which is nothing new. But obviously, just listen to Nick Wright on that. I guess just let him take that away. But those are the top 2 quarterbacks. Those are who we've been battling with nonstop here. So an interesting scene around the AFC. Whereas I would say that the team that looked the best by far was the 49ers, and they're over in the NFC. And even the Eagles, they won, but that was not a convincing win for them either. So just a lot of meh across the league in week 1, which is probably normal with how many teams sit their players in the preseason now. It's just it's almost like a warm-up game. And usually the Chiefs are one of the teams that's above that, and yet they fell into it themselves this year.
So let's say biggest surprise on the bad side. What's the team that jumps out to you that you really didn't think was going to play as poorly as they did? Is it the Bengals or the Bills, or is it some other team and you just know that sometimes, stuff happens?
I'll go off the board and say Steelers, because everybody had the Steelers making the playoffs this year. They were everybody's surprise team, and they just got their shits canned from the very beginning.
I personally will go off the board as well. And to me, it's Minnesota, because they're playing Tampa, who I guess they still have some very respectable pieces on defense. But I have not given Tampa any thought the entire offseason, because their quarterback room is led by Baker Mayfield. I'm I can't take this team seriously. And for Minnesota to not only lose to that team, but Kirk has 3 turnovers, 2 of them in really critical positions. I think Minnesota is better than that. And I thought that was a really disappointing loss for the Vikings.
Biggest surprise in a good way? I'll go with the Dolphins. I thought their offense kind of got figured out as last year went on. There's kind of some tape. There's kind of a theory that the Chargers and I think the 49ers kind of put some tape on how to stop the Dolphins offense. And then they found themselves playing the Chargers in week 1 here, and the Chargers did not stop the Miami offense. And they went off in a big way. They looked fun like they did at the beginning of last year again. So I thought Miami was very surprising in a good way.
I'll cheat on the biggest good surprise, because I was looking and looking and looking, and ultimately I just landed on the Chiefs. Hey, biggest good surprise, that the loss, not that bad. That's my biggest good surprise.
What
I could come up with, man. I was looking at it and I'm who surprised me in a good way this week? And I said, the Chiefs. I was very surprised that losing to the Lions is not as bad as it seems.
Let's change paths. Let's go with a little preview here, because we got a big game this week. We got about 10 minutes left in this show here, and I want to talk about it. The Chiefs versus Jags coming up. I thought the Jags, Trevor Lawrence looked really good. I had Trevor Lawrence winning NFL MVP this year. I just thought I think it's always a quarterback who takes a leap. That's who they're always looking for MVP. There's always kind of a storyline push behind it. And Trevor Lawrence just taking that push. He's got Calvin Ridley to throw to now. I love the other weapons in his game. I love Doug Peterson at coach. So I just very high on the Jaguars. That game was really close for a while. There was kind of a fluke play with that fumble return, touchdown, weird play. But other than that, their offense was clicking. And they got ETN, who looked great. They got that backup Bugs Bunny, something like that. But I don't know, where are you looking at for Chiefs Jags? I mean, we got to go down to Jacksonville. It's probably going to be hot as fuck. That's the official weather report that I got. And so I guess I would say this. My main takeaway is, if you believe in the Jags, is it too early to say that home field advantage might kind of sort of be on the line here? I mean, because if you lose this one, now you're 2 games behind the Jags, and you have the tiebreaker going their way, despite the excuses. So that kind of puts us 2.5 games behind the Jags, if you believe them. I know we did this with Buffalo early in the season, either last year or 2 years ago, probably, and we still came back and got home field advantage. But we have to talk about something. And that's kind of my take, that it's going to be hard to get home field advantage if you lose this game.
I don't disagree. another advantage kind of playing in Jacksonville's favor is their division. There's a rookie quarterback in Houston, a rookie quarterback in Indy, and Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee. The AFC South is still and has perpetually been for the better part of 20, 25 years now. They're just bad. You get one team, Peyton's Colts in there for a long time, and that's about it. I'll say this. Something I found very interesting about the Jags in week 1. Listen to a little fantasy pod, and they said that Christian Kirk only saw the field when the Jags went to 3 wide. Never saw a snap when they were in what would essentially be a base offense of 1 or 2 wide receivers. So Calvin Ridley has very clearly stepped in and taken over the wide receiver 1 role, but his complement in Jacksonville getting those base down snaps is Zay Jones. And Zay Jones had a nice year last year and really had a nice year 2 years ago for the Raiders before he signed in Jacksonville. Nice player and probably a little bit more of a classic, what do they call them? The X, the bigger guy that can kind of run the in-breaking routes, go over the middle, block some guys in the run game. He does a lot of that stuff, and Christian Kirk does not. But, man, Christian Kirk, all that money, all the stuff that people talked about with the contract, and this guy is only playing when they go to 3 wide receivers, limiting the snaps that he's getting unless they're playing in 3 wide all the time. I don't necessarily know if Doug Peterson's going to call it that way. I mean, coming from Andy Reid, 2-3 tight ends has been the business for a long time. So that's an interesting thing to watch. If Christian Kirk, a guy who, at least in that first game, really lit the Chiefs up, if he's not getting that much time on the field, I think that plays right in the Chiefs' favor.
Yeah, and he only had a catch for 9 yards in that game, and I do remember him tearing us up quite a bit. He was giving L'Jarius Sneed some fits.
Yeah.
In
a bad matchup.
It was at the regular season game.
It was the regular season game, yes, I believe.
Okay.
He may have been good in the playoff game too, but I know in the regular season game he tore us up. It was bad.
I wonder if we see more McDuffie on him, who I think saw almost all of the slot snaps this week, and he was kind of on Amon-Ra quite a bit. And the nerds say he did a pretty bang-up job. So Kirk went 7 for 52 against us in the playoffs last year. He went 9 for 105 and 2 touchdowns against us in the regular season. Yeah. So a decent game in the playoffs, but went off in the regular season game. So yeah, that is something interesting to keep an eye on. On the other side of the ball, they had Josh Allen, the good Josh Allen, have 3 sacks in the game. And they also had Trayvon Walker, the first overall pick last year. He registered a sack. And the offensive line is not something we've really touched on in either one of our podcasts. Real quick, I thought Donovan Smith held his own. I thought he had a really good game, who people were worried about until that holding on the last drive, which really hurt him. But outside of that, I thought Donovan Smith did a bang-up job. Jawan Taylor, he was a big topic, obviously. But I think he more than held his own going against Hutchinson for most of that game, whereas I think a lot of people thought that he really struggled because they saw Hutchinson get so many pressures, but I think a lot of those pressures came inside against Trey Smith. I can remember at least 3 where he's lined up over the guard and just kind of interestingly beats Trey Smith around the edge, almost because Jawan Taylor is lined up so off to the right and so back, it kind of opened up this going around the edge of the guard hole. And I feel like Hutchinson got most of his pressures that way. So I thought the tackles did a decent job, or a pretty good job, I would say. I did run a poll asking people on Twitter. 56% people thought they played solid, 22% okay, 17% very good. So most people landed on solid in that first game. Did you have any thoughts on the offensive line or how they might hold up against these 2 bookends from the Jags?
Overall, no, I don't have thoughts on the offensive line because I don't know how to do it.
Good shit.
I kind of like that Jawan Taylor has suddenly become the poster child for something that apparently offensive linemen have been doing for a long time, and whatever. Hey, revenge game for Jawan Taylor. I don't know really what revenge he needs to get on Jacksonville or the state of Florida, which apparently he'd like never really stepped foot outside of, except for, occasional road games. So he'd only played for teams in Florida, grew up in Florida, went to Florida, and then get drafted by the Jags.
A Florida man.
So yeah, I mean, he's a Florida man, returning home, going to take them to all the best restaurants in Jacksonville. I think they still have a TGI Fridays down there.
Oh,
I don't know how worried I would be about the pass rush in Jacksonville, like over the course of 4 quarters, mostly because Anthony Richardson, I would imagine, was holding the ball longer than Patrick Mahomes typically does. But if the receivers, for some reason, aren't getting open, it could be a challenge. I don't want to give Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker time, 2 top 10 picks in the NFL draft. You give them more time, they'll make you pay.
Well, clearly, if Mahomes just throws it in under 3 seconds, we win. So I don't think that's the game plan going forward. Obviously, you're welcome, Andrew Reid.
Yeah, you didn't actually clarify that, like where he needed to throw it or
nothing else matters.
Catching, just has to get the ball out of his hand in under 3 seconds, and good things happen.
Are you going to deny facts? I mean, these are the facts. I mean, what do you want me to say? But yeah, I mean, just a fun game. Say we go 0-2, what would your worry level be? You freaking out?
I mean, probably still no. Chiefs have some good excuses. But look, I'll say this. A question that you had that got scrapped was basically like, what would it take for you to not be confident entering the playoffs? And I had been thinking about this kind of nonstop since you posed it as potentially like one of the 10 for the year. And I'll say this. If the Chiefs kind of limp into the playoffs as a wild card team, not winning the division for the first time in 7 or 8 years, I might be able to say something like, well, they were due to not win it, so to speak. But it would be mostly about never seeing the offense get going. That's, I think, where it would lead me to not be confident entering the playoffs. So if they go 0-2, I'm probably still going to be singing the same song next week that we are this week. Like, they're trying to figure out this receiver room, maybe they miss Kelsey again this week. Chris Jones isn't at full strength. Kadarius Toney missed all the training camp. Like, there's all these different kind of excuses. And, I'll lean into those.
And we got the fallback of playing the Bears in week 3 and the Jets in week 4. Yeah. Jets sans Aaron Rodgers, obviously. Maybe Chad Henne will be in place at that time. Maybe Chase Daniel. Maybe Tom Brady.
Hey, whoa.
Maybe Mike Glennon.
Do not suggest current KCSN host and MC Chase Daniel. He's not up for grabs. He's under contract with KCSN.
He's holding in. He is sitting in BJ's office right now, doing nothing, with 2 greasy brothers sitting next to his side, flanked to his sides, and he's holding in. He's holding in for that starting quarterback job. But yeah, I think he got 2 relatively easy games after that, so I don't think there'd be too much reason to panic. But it would be interesting. We would be looking at kind of a 21-21 season here, where we're kind of fighting for our playoff lives, where that hasn't been the case for the rest of the Mahomes era. And it's just kind of, we spend so much time talking, this is a January team, it's getting ready for January, whereas then you'd have to go into a bit of survival mode and just to make sure that you get to January. So it kind of changes the equation of the season a little bit. But it'll be very interesting to watch. I'm very excited for the game. I think it might be the 2 best teams in the AFC, especially after what we saw around the AFC in week 1. So I am very, very excited for this game to see how the Chiefs respond to a loss.
I am too. I think it's probably. I think it's the best game of the weekend. And
game day's going there. That's what I heard.
And man, I mean, it's in a nooner, a little 10 a.m. for my West Coast wingman. Early rise for Chiefs Jags on Sunday. Very much looking forward to the Andy Reid, Doug Peterson matchup, reunion, whatever you want to call it. And hopefully
Andy is dominant against his former assistants, correct? Isn't that a thing?
Yes.
That's a thing.
But yeah, man, I mean, hopefully the Chiefs are at full strength and we get a game. I wouldn't mind another, kind of low scoring affair, if you will, reminiscent of that Thursday night game. We'll see how it plays out, but I'm excited for Chiefs Jags on Sunday. And folks, we're going to wrap it up. Our first ever live episode of Amateur Hour. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for all the questions from everybody. I'm glad we could answer all of them. I don't know how to find them quite yet. I'm sure they're around here somewhere, but thank you for asking. We will be answering them at some point.
Absolutely. Well, folks, this has been Amateur Hour. I'm Ryan Scott Hall. He's his Dirkness. And if you check the tape, it's true. Justin Herbert is Phillip Rivers.